everybody.
Right.
Welcome. And you're not seeing, it's not my eyeshadow, it's my eye shadow there. So I could make lots of humor about it, but the reason my eye is somewhat dark there is because I had a bit of a skin tag, and so they biopsied it. And when they do anything to your eyes, it looks like you've been in a fight. I assure you, it wasn't a fight. But anyway, so enough of that. Been playing pickleball, and everybody new comes in and says, "What happened to you?" Because it's kind of hard to hide. So anyway, welcome. Dieter and I are here to welcome you for this week's edition of Fearless Flight Live. It is our weekly show on Facebook to try to help people out there who have a fear of flying, who may know somebody or who just like to keep up with the airline industry. And tonight we got a couple of the bulk of the show was about the airline industry. So without further ado, I should welcome Dieter here. He just had a long visit with his family from Austria.
And lots of
And
flying involved back and forth.
yeah,
And
not
not
for you.
everybody with the same comfort level.
Yeah, right. Are any of your folks, any of your family, are they nervous about flying at all?
My mom will fly. She's just
Yeah,
very, very anxious. And
yeah.
so she watched our show every week, and she replayed. And actually I encourage everybody to do that, because
Sure.
on YouTube, if you just go on our channel and you look and you type in things like turbulence, then
Yeah.
our videos that contain turbulence actually pop up. So that's a
Wow. That's cool.
I did not know that. My mom told me that.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
great function now that YouTube
Yeah.
provides, where you can search for keywords. Like flying over water was one of hers. And whenever we mentioned flying over water in a previous episode, it just showed those episodes. It's really cool.
Yeah, and let me say a little bit about that. I get more and more people who find us on the internet, and we have people all the time that tell me and tell Dieter that they watch videos and turbulence and things like that. And I would never discourage anybody from watching anything, but just be advised just because you watch a video about turbulence, particularly if it's one with somebody filmed on board and there's people being thrown around and stuff like that, it's probably not going to have a positive effect on you. And I'm not here to say that that doesn't happen, but I am here to say that you want to get some information that's grounded in more than just panic and distress. So,
Mhm.
and we've started. You may have noticed, Dieter and I have started kind of a new flavor for what we're doing here tonight. Will be right along in that context, and that is we're looking at things that happen that are relevant out there in the media, and we put together a little show on that. So I will, without further ado, I will share my screen, and we'll get started here, and we'll talk about some of the things that have been more current. So formally, I'll re-welcome you, everybody. On behalf of Dieter and I, we're here to help you get something out of tonight's session. If you do, let us know. If you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, please feel free to leave us a message on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever you may be watching it. And if you have any questions or comments, we welcome those as well. Dieter does his best to try to catch people commenting through Facebook. It's a little bit awkward. We tried with a phone line to get people to call in, but that's pretty stressful for a lot of people. So we may go back to that if we once we get a new launch of our platform here. So anyway, so welcome to the show, everybody. We always mention joining Fearless Flight Facebook group called Birds of a Feather, and it gets bigger every week, and we'd like to continue to see it grow. People tell me that this is one of the most helpful resources they find. Just being able to talk to you all out there and people who are in various stages of fear flying, it helps people validate that they're not crazy. And it also helps them find hope for people who are further down the road than maybe you are. So by all means, consider joining Birds of a Feather if you haven't. And what else can I say? So tonight, let's talk. Last week I talked about controller training and what that means and what goes into it. Tonight, let's look at that. Let's call it what it is. There's a bit of a crisis there. I have to confess, I used a little bit of a exclamatory title there to try to get your interest there. It is a crisis by some standards in terms of the shortage of controllers out there. So we're going to look into that a little bit. And many of you know there was a mishap between a Southwest flight 1496 took off out of Burbank last, I think it was Friday or Thursday, and on its way up to Las Vegas, and the pilot had to deviate around another airplane up there. I think you're going to be surprised when you hear what the actual numbers are, the details, okay? And I had just flown with a VIP student, that same route, different flight number, but the same route a couple days earlier. And of course, he called me up right away, says, "Holy cow, Ron, we were on that flight." And I said, "Well, we weren't actually on that flight. We were on another one." And I said, even the other one we were on was at a different time of the day. But I got his point. It's, he is touched by that. So we had a little bit of a conversation, which I highly recommend you all to do, is to not get stuck in the energy of that story and all that. So we're gonna look at that, see what happened, and then if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. So every time you board a plane, there's an invisible team working behind the scenes out there. It's called air traffic control. And they work in several facilities. One, they work in the tower. That's the big tall building you can see on every major airport. Two, they work in approach control, TRACON. It's Terminal Radar Approach Control. It's an acronym. And so some of them work in a room, a radar room, and they control the traffic around about 35 miles away from the airport in a circle around it. And then there's some others called air route traffic control centers. And they are in major urban areas, and they cover the geographic area of the United States. You have air controllers like Los Angeles Center, Albuquerque Center, Denver Center, Fort Worth Center, Atlanta Center. These are there's 12 sectors, or 12 segments divided over the geography of the United States, and these are the people there. So those three groups of people all employ controllers, and once somebody goes through the air traffic control system or training academy, and if they successfully pass that, which we talked about last time, what the success rates are, once they get through the academy in Oklahoma City, they now go out to another facility. It can be the tower, it can be TRACON, or it can be Air Route Traffic Control Center. And from there, it's 3 to 5 years. You don't go just graduate from the academy in Oklahoma City and then go out and become a certified controller. It takes a lot of stuff. And we're going to touch on that. That's part of the training process, is one of the challenges for people. So but anyway, these controllers are the calm voices that coordinate thousands of flights a day, about 85,000 in the US alone, passenger flights. And they guide us, myself, and you through the skies, and they make sure everybody takes off with smoothly and in good order. And really without realizing what the complexity is of the task that's in front of them. About the only times we associate ourselves with that is when something goes wrong and hits the newspapers. But right now, there's a serious strain on the system. You get a lot of old people, not as old as me, but still old in the retirement age. And the retirement for a controller is around 54, I believe, or 55. It's relatively early. But they're having a staffing crisis. They're about 3,000. They need about 3,000 more controllers to meet just the national demand, and yet nearly 1 in 5 trainees failed at their first assigned facility. So if you remember back last week, I talked about the failure rates about a third. I forgot the details, but about a third of the people don't even make it through the facility. The training in Oklahoma City, and then of those people who make it through successfully, when they get to their destination, their first training assignment, about 20% of them don't make it beyond that to ever get fully qualified. So for what does that mean? It doesn't mean that the skies are dangerous necessarily, but it does mean that you're going to have more delays, more overtime for controllers, and a system that struggles to keep up. And you've seen that and then you throw in there the antiquated equipment in some of the facilities, and you got a real problem. So, but for people with flight anxiety, I mean, this matters on a deeper level, because if you're already nervous about flying, yeah, you have what's called confirmation bias, and you fixate on everything being handled safely up there. And when you hear about problems, it supports your belief that, see, I told you that flying was dangerous. Not true. You have to have a real understanding for how air traffic control works. And we tried to do that last week. So when the headlines talk about burnout, understaffing, or failure in training, it chips away at that sense of reassurance that you, as a fearful flyer, are looking for and hoping to be comforted by. And so this presentation, my presentation tonight, isn't just about policy or workforce numbers. It's about restoring confidence in the system that keeps us all safe, despite the understaffing. And when you understand the roots of the crisis and what it'll take to fix it, you can better support both the professionals in the tower and anxious flyers in the cabin. So let's take a closer look at that. And then just let me know if you got anybody that's got any questions along the way, Dieter. So I wonder, I don't hear much
I think,
about
Ron, there's one question. If everything is so regulated, how come that this crisis even started with all the knowledge that the FAA has? So that's an interesting question, actually.
Well, I
You know what I mean? It's like, was that not foreseeable? I guess is the shortening of.
Oh, I think they definitely saw it coming, but nobody was willing to do anything for years. We had this huge airport fund that your taxes on your tickets. If you look at your ticket, if you look at that fine print on there, look about. I mean, you take a $200 fare, $60 of that goes to somebody along the way, the airport, the FAA, and whatnot. Fines if somebody gets stranded on the ramp somewhere and they can't get passengers off for 3 hours or more, and they get these $10,000 per person fines on the airplane. It doesn't go to you as a passenger. It goes to Uncle Sam, and he's the one that realizes that benefit. So it's not so much about not seeing it coming. It's about people taking action and doing something. And of course, that's the way we are, humanity. We don't take the first warning. We don't take the second warning. We wait. Unfortunately, we wait until somebody gets hurt sometimes when it's a critical thing like this. And I'm not saying that you're in any danger out there. I've tried to establish, Dieter's tried to establish that when we have fewer controllers than what we like or what's optimal, we just don't put as many airplanes in the air. So that's why you get stuck on the ground and your flight gets delayed. So, okay. So as I said, we need about 11,500 certified controllers, and they're about 3,000 short of that, around 8,500. And it's affecting nearly every airport. It forces overtime on people, leads to fatigue. I think the standard controller work week is 6 days now. I don't think anybody gets past that. I was just speculating. I should have done some research here, but see what the Canadian air traffic control system, what status they're in, and you don't hear anything about it. They have less traffic, that, but you don't hear any of the complaints like you do down here. So, okay, failure rate of the trainees is alarming, and this is a passion of mine. Just training in general. I spent much of my career in training other pilots. And it's really part of the reason why I love doing the Fearful Flyer thing here, because I really like teaching people. And at some key locations like New York's Long Island facility, the washout rate is as high as 69%. Imagine that. They get 10 controllers from Oklahoma City, and only 3 of them ever become fully qualified. So even promising candidates are unable to make it through this grueling on-the-job training phase. And the OJT is really, really tough. And it can take, like I said, from 3 to 5 years to become a fully qualified controller. So why is that? Let's look at some of the things. Trainees have described a toxic culture with public humiliation, belittlement, and even racist behavior. Well, that doesn't sound like the kind of environment that's going to make people want to, one, learn, and 2, work there. And we have an apprentice-style system, and it leaves too much to individual trainer discretion with no standards. I know as a pilot, one of my pet peeves is I taught in the Air Force in the undergraduate pilot training system for a while. So that meant that I was training new pilots, future pilots in the Air Force. And I noticed a lot of the guys that become instructors, not a lot, but some of them are really good pilots. And they took the job as being an instructor pilot, not because they really wanted to teach people, but because they wanted to fly the airplane and they couldn't get the airplane that they wanted and they thought they'd wait it out there. So sometimes you may have noticed this in your own walk of life, that people who are really good and competent in what they do sometimes don't make very good trainers. And that's definitely a factor here. And so there's no national standards here to ensure fair, effective, or supportive learning environments. So what they need somebody that can do some organizational processing and development there to work on getting the training system to support that, so we don't lose so many people, or at least as many for some of the reasons there. And add to that the barriers to retention. Some of the trainees are assigned far from home with areas of high housing costs. Los Angeles Center, Seattle Center, Washington, D.C., Miami Center, Dallas Fort Worth Center. A lot of these places are in areas economically that are more expensive than other places around the country. And so you get somebody that starts out there, even though they get paid during training, the starting pay is 55 grand a year. And that's pretty tough to make a living off of that for a lot of people. So anyway, so the result, burnout and dropout. And now here's some of the good news, fixing the pipeline. The FAA is upgrading simulators, making them better and more realistic and more technologically sound, and instituting some bonus. But experts agree that the key is changing the culture, not just changing the equipment, but changing the people and the attitudes of people who do the training around there. And they need supportive mentoring. They need people that have patience, among other things, and are able to create standardized expectations across all the facilities so they can help more trainees succeed. Not everybody can do all these jobs. Not everybody can fly airplanes, but we are losing people that would be otherwise highly qualified and competent in doing that. So, and you can imagine, if we get rid of 2/3 of the people that we sent through Oklahoma City, we're not getting much bang for our buck, and that's having a negative effect on that. There's a trainee that was interviewed. His name was Ryan Higgins, and his experience illustrates a systemic issue. He was capable and motivated, but according to him, the culture is what drove him away. And again, to fix the shortage, we got to fix the system that's failing too many willing and able recruits. And so, kind of the bottom line on all this is the FAA's training crisis. It's real. It's real. They need to make some serious changes. You got to wonder, you wouldn't get a public personality to fly your airplane around, from point A to point B. It makes me wonder how I have no axe to grind with the particular individual, but he had no background in aviation. He was a celebrity on Fox News. And again, I don't know him personally. I don't have an axe to grind, but you got to question when we put people like that in charge of the system. To his credit, he's been very active in that, and I'm willing to give him a chance. We just have to see if we see any real changes in that. And we can't afford to ignore the toll that it takes on safety and staffing and the human beings caught up in this system that often sets them up to fail. And but if we recognize the depth of the problem, that's really the first step toward real change. And the good news, it isn't a technical impossibility. It's a cultural and structural change. Of course, I don't know about you, but it's kind of akin to having an issue with anxiety and stuff. Changing human behavior is a really awesomely difficult task sometimes. So changing the culture is got to help a bunch of human beings. So it's in that same vein, but it means that we can fix the system, and if we can get to standardized training and have some respectful mentorship so that people don't feel humiliated at the very least, and a renewed commitment to supporting those people who aspire to serve in this demanding role. We can rebuild a pipeline that not only trains controllers, but it helps us hang on to them. And hope lies in the fact that the solutions are within reach, but it's going to take some serious leadership, accountability, and the courage to reshape a system that's long overdue for reform. And the sky is not the limit in this case; it's the destination, and we need to get back to building a workforce that supports these air traffic controllers. So we'll keep your eyes and ears tuned on this, and keep pressure on your congressman to make sure that they don't lose sight of how important this is. Okay. And the other area, as promised, is we want to take a look at what happened with this Southwest flight. And in this, we're not just going to talk about the actual incident. We're going to talk about a little bit about the kinds of flight plans that they were on, and what you may not have noticed or what may have not met your eye. So it was they call it near collision, we used to call it near miss, but now they call it near collision. And it unfolded on July 25th. And I forgot, what is today, the 29th? Yeah, so, okay, just 4 or 5 days ago. And this was a Southwest Flight 1496 climbing out of Hollywood Burbank. If you've ever been on that airport, you take off to the southeast typically. You make a quick right turn and you curl all the way back over. And this particular airplane was going to Las Vegas. So it's about 270 degrees of turn to get there. And a Hawker Hunter jet. Now, and these are images of those two airplanes. The Hawker Hunter, you can see that's not a new F-18 or F-16 type looking airplane. It's an old jet. So guess what? Militaries don't fly those anymore. Who owns them? Rich people. And was the case of this. There's a couple of those in service. And so it's not hard to find out who owns that airplane and who was flying it. And what I'll do is I'll unpack the sequence of what we know so far and the critical differences between IFR and VFR flight rules. These are the two different types of flight plans that come into play if you fly airplanes, and why it matters, why you'd want to know a little bit about that. So before we dive in, I want you to acknowledge that some of you may not feel easy, just hearing about this in close calls, and it's completely understandable. But it's why we're here. We're not here to sensationalize this, but we're here to demystify. We're here to tell you what we know, what's factual, and what was relevant out of this. And today I'll walk you through this incident that occurred on July 25th, as I said, involving a Southwest Airlines 737-700. So they have about 145 seats on there, plus the 5 crew members, and a vintage military jet named this Hawker Hunter. That Hunter was an airplane that came out in the 60s and 70s, I believe, maybe slightly before that. And it was a British design, British airplane in its origins there. When I was teaching in the Air Force, we had contracts with foreign governments, and we trained some Jordanian pilots. And those guys had flown the Hawker Hunter. I remember them talking about it. Some funny stories about airplanes when they get old in a country that doesn't maintain them all that well. Anyway, so yes, it does involve a moment of elevated risk. But what's most important, and what I want you to leave you with, is an understanding of how modern systems and skilled pilots worked exactly as the system was designed to protect everybody on board. Okay, let me repeat that. This is not to sensationalize it or anything like that, or leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. It's to help you get an understanding of how the modern aviation system and skilled pilots worked together to make this situation tenable and where it wasn't a factor. So first we'll look at what happened, how safety protocols like traffic collision avoidance system, sometimes referred to as TCAS, TCAS, how it works and how it acted like a protective bubble around this Southwest airplane. And we'll talk about how visual flying rules, VFR, and instrument flying rules, IFR, differ, and why those details matter behind the scenes if you're a pilot. but they rarely affect you as a passenger directly. You don't even know whether you're VFR or IFR, except you can't ride in a commercial airliner unless they're flying on an IFR clearance. And most of all, my goal is to keep you, help you feel more informed and less afraid. That would be the bottom line here. So when we know what's happening up there, the fear often starts to lose its grip. And that's really what's significance to this. We don't want you to go away with that. So what happened? Okay. About 6 minutes after the 737 took off, they got a TCAS warning. They got two of them, actually. The pilots complied first climbing because the first indication they had said to climb, and then they got another one that said to descend, and they ended up descending about 500 feet. And tracking data shows that the Hawker Hunter was just 400 feet above and within under 5 miles, a dangerously close encounter. Okay, so I'm gonna put this in a little bit of perspective. Okay, I'm not gonna diminish the fact that when you get a TCAS, if you're a pilot, you do exactly what it says to do. And it's not surprising that it told them one thing and then told them another, because it's constantly drawing a vector to see what is going to get you away from the target as quickly as possible. And if somebody is maneuvering, that's what triggered the TCAS out, and they are maneuvering. Now, I don't know that. I don't know anything about the airplane, the Hawker Hunter, and I've not seen anything written yet to tell me what they were doing. But if they were in fact changing altitude rapidly, that's why it could have first given them a command or to climb and then to descend, because it's constantly computing that problem and reconciling the situation. So picture this, if you can, 400 feet separation vertically, okay? When you think about that, it doesn't sound too good, but they never were closer than 4.8 miles, okay? So they were almost 5 miles away, even though they were only 400 feet higher in altitude. Again, I'm not saying that's desirable, but that's the reality. So that tells you, what a near miss can generate. And probably the most remarkable thing about that was the pilot's reaction. And he did so, I'm not here to criticize him. He made an aggressive correction. And his first thing, when he ultimately pushed the nose over to descend, which was his final maneuver, he put some people who weren't fastened in their seatbelts, he put them up against the ceiling. And the flight attendants were out of their seats at that time because they were out of 10,000 feet. They were climbing through 14,000, and they had started service. So it's not surprising, like most incidents like this, whether it's turbulence or whether it's a TCAS warning, you have the flight attendants are the most vulnerable. And that's why we say never, ever, ever sit in your seat. If you have no reason to get up, never sit in your seat without your seatbelt fastened securely about you. It's the only way you're going to get hurt on an airplane. No passengers were hurt. The flight attendants went to the hospital. They continued on the sled. Of course, it's only about a 35-minute flight to Las Vegas, and they were almost halfway there by the time this happened. And so they went ahead and completed the trip. And I think the flight attendants went to the hospital, but nobody was admitted. They just got checked out. So, okay. Now, here's where all the news starts. Passengers recounted traumatic turbulence. Of course it's traumatic, because nobody experiences that kind of maneuvering inside, typically when you're in an airliner. And some of the passengers flew out of their seats, the ones that weren't fastened in. As I said, the flight attendants were injured, although passengers remain unharmed. And it was the crew's quick compliance under the TCAS instructions. That's what we train all the time in the simulator with. And that's what's credited to averting any more serious possibilities, and maybe even a possible midair collision, which would have ruined everybody's day. Okay. So what was the Hawker Hunter doing? Okay. And I got a call from one of the producers at NBC News National that I've been working with ever since 9/11. And he calls me up and says, "So what's the story here, Ron?" I said, "Well, the story in my estimation is not about the TCAS so much, although that was the part that we're all grateful for. It was about an airplane up in that airspace, and we don't know what they were doing." Okay. And they had every right to be there. Uh, and so if you look at the bullet points up here, they were flying to Point Magoo, and I don't know where they originated from. It wasn't from Burbank, but they were going through the same airspace. This I asked ChatGPT to draw me a thing, but it screwed up. So this blue line should have been going up here to Las Vegas there. But anyway, so their paths crossed about 6 minutes after the 737 took off. And notice this second bullet point: likely adversary training or transit. So it was either just transiting through the area or it was doing some adversary training. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay. So keep that in mind. So their paths crossed, and what we're going to find out is the Hawker Hunter was on a VFR flight plan. So what the significance of that is, and let me go into this next slide real quick to talk about that. This is something you might want to park in the back of your mind there. Two kinds of flight plans, okay? And you don't have to file a flight plan at all if you're out there on your own, if you're in the right airspace. You can't be in an airplane without following the rules and having a clearance and talking to the controllers. If you want to go through the LAX airspace or the New York City airspace or the Washington, D.C. airspace, you can't do that. But if you're filing a VFR flight plan, you can be in a lot of places and be running along where airliners operate. And I think this will be some of the most likely areas that we see a change in. But an IFR flight plan, we call it's instrument flying rules. And what it means, it's a flight plan where you're guaranteed radar separation. So you're guaranteed radar separation from anybody else on an IFR flight plan. If you've got somebody like a Hawker Hunter that's on a VFR flight plan or not on any type of flight plan alone, they are not obligated to talk to any controllers, and nor are the controllers obligated to point them out. Now, controllers do point them out, and we have another thing that we talk about, which I did when I was in Vietnam, when you're anywhere in the United States and you're not required to be in an IFR flight plan, but you are flying through an area with airline traffic for a matter, it makes no sense to not get visual flight following. And so I can talk to an air traffic controller, the same one that the Southwest airplane would have been talking to, and I can ask him, subject to his workload, can you give me visual advisories? And what he will do, he will let me know anybody he's out there talking to, which would include all of the IFR flights, like commercial airliners, but it could be other airplanes that are on a VFR flight plan, a visual flight plan, and they're getting radar advisories as well. Okay, so IFR flight plan, radar separation, guaranteed from any other airplane that's on an IFR flight plan, and it's ATC managed by air traffic control. VFR flight plan, visual separation, see and avoid. That means you are responsible for your own separation from other airplanes. And bear in mind, when you're at 14,000 feet, 14,500 feet, like this Hawker Hunter was, and you're not required to talk to anybody, and you're above 10,000 feet, you can go as fast as you damn well please. So and the other thing about that is when you're going faster, you have less time to visually acquire somebody else. Okay. And the see and avoid policy is enforced, and limited air traffic control, only voluntary if you decide to do that. And you can see the note at the bottom: commercial flights, you can't fly in an airliner without being on an IFR flight plan. That's why when you get ready to go and they say we got a gate hold, or we got a hold going into LA out of Phoenix, for example, it means that there's too many airplanes in the air, or there's no room in the air, and you got to wait till you get a slot in there. And that can be due to any number of things: restricted flow due to weather, restricted flow due to traffic, or fewer controllers than what they need. Okay. And it makes a statement here, says VFR riskier in shared airspace, for sure. If you're out there operating with a high performance airplane like this one in an area with other high performance airplanes like airliners, and you're not talking to either the controller or other airplanes, you're putting yourself and other people in greater risk. And this, for some pilots, it's like the Second Amendment. They just will protest all the way to the door on not having to file an IFR flight plan or a VFR flight plan with advisory service. Anyway, okay, so let's go back. Let's talk about what adversary training, and this may be what comes into play. Sometimes this is called aggressor training. Well, it's a type of military flight training in which a pilot or a team simulates the behavior or tactics of an enemy or opposing force during a mock air combat scenario. It's designed to prepare military pilots for real-world combat situations by exposing them to the kinds of tactics and maneuvers they might encounter from an enemy adversary. And here's how it works. There's a lot of role playing out there. You have one airplane, usually an older type high performance airplane, and there's a squadron of them up at Nellis Air Force Base where they have the Fighter Weapons School, which is an Air Force group, and so you have somebody playing the bad guy in these other airplanes, and the pilots are in specially painted jets, often older aircraft like the Hawker Hunter or the F-5 Tiger, and they play the role of enemy aircraft, and they make it hard for the military pilots to see them and find them and all that. And it's because it's the pilots are highly skilled that fly these adversarial missions, and they're trained to mimic foreign attack force tactics. And this is usually done in controlled airspace, like military airspace only, up around Nellis and up in northern Nevada there. And it's coordinated through air traffic control and military command. So when the airlines cut through these areas sometimes, and I remember that well. You know, when I was going from Las Vegas over to San Francisco, there's a heavily used military airspace up there. And what you would do is, if your normal flight plan would clear you around that, which was a little bit longer distance to go. But once you got airborne, you could talk to the controllers who also controlled that military airspace. And if it was not in use that day, they'd let you cut across that. So it has a practical application of that as well. Locations like Point Mugu Naval Air Station on the California coast are one of the common training sites for this kind of stuff. And why is this important? Because it provides realistic high stakes training without the actual danger. And the goal is to help combat pilots sharpen their skills under pressure, just as they would need in a real world engagement. And you have private contractors, believe it or not, like so much of the military, a lot of this stuff has been farmed out to private vendors. So you got people out there that corporations that get these old airplanes and they turn them into aggressor roles. And they've been outsourced to civilian defense contractors who operate these old fighters under military guidelines. And that's likely the case with this particular Hawker Hunter that was involved in this incident. Now, like I said, I'm not seeing anything in the media yet, whether they were actually out there horsing around. I shouldn't say horsing around, whether they're out there operationally acting as aggressors, but I doubt it. The fact that they came interfered with that airway out there tells me. So what's this all say to you? If you got flight anxiety, this can sound alarming, but in reality, these flights are routine, tightly regulated, and occur safely every day, often far from commercial air routes. And they just don't operate them routinely around where airliners are flying for obvious reasons, okay? And the challenge in this incident appears to be a rare coordination breakdown. We'll see. We'll see whether they were supposed to be out there, what they were doing, and if there was a breakdown in people managing this, okay? So the nature of the training is not in jeopardy. It's just what they were doing out there. We have some historical accidents that happen when the coordination was poor. Especially when VFR military or private aircraft entered civilian corridors. In '71, there was a Hughes aircraft airliner, a DC-9, and it ran into an F-4, had a mid-air collision with an F-4 Phantom. 2015, there was an F-16 that ran into a Cessna near Monk's Corner. I'm not sure where that is. I think it's out in California. And both prompted tighter rules on VFR aircraft. So we've had some problems with this in the past, but what we didn't have is the tight rules and the proliferation of some of these high performance airplanes like we have out there now. And so this incident shows how even advanced systems like TCAS are reactive, not preventative. Investigation, you can bet on the ongoing investigation will determine whether ATC, air traffic control, had full situational awareness and what procedural gaps existed. So let me say one other thing in short. There's no correlation between the controllers, at least at this point, between the controller shortage and the problems they have getting new controllers and replacing controllers and this accident. No connection. Okay. So we need to keep that in mind. And
yeah, that's something I added in because you asked
oh, okay, cool.
how
Okay.
Canada and
great.
and
Good
Europe
job.
stack up. And what seems to be the case is that Canada is doing better.
Yeah.
And if you go to the next slide, it kind of gives you a little glimpse why,
Yeah. Here's a matrix. Yeah.
the FAA, sorry, in the United States, it's government controlled. In Canada, it's privatized with CAE, which is also a provider of
Simulators.
the simulators,
Yeah.
correct. And in Europe, it's
Yeah.
very fragmented because there's lots of countries. We always think of Europe,
Yeah.
but lots of countries.
Absolutely.
So you can
imagine what it's like around the world and other cultures and stuff like that. So
exactly.
So it reveals that the government structure plays a crucial role in the crisis response. And so, it's sad because we led the aviation industry for many, many, many years throughout the world. So it's kind of a sad state of affairs for us to get this far behind the power curve on that. But at least people are looking at it, and that is the probably the bright light at the end of the tunnel.
Ron, we do have a couple of questions after you're done with the part.
Okay, cool. So kind of getting to the end of this. Okay, you may recognize that's our traditional Swiss cheese model. That's the model we use for aviation safety management. Incidents like this erode the confidence for people like you, anxious flyers. But it does reinforce the need for safety layers. Again, the most important thing was the fact that the crew demonstrated how resilient the system can be, and it prevented an otherwise really tragic accident. If you remember this, having the Swiss cheese here, each layer of Swiss cheese represents a layer of protection. It might be pilot training, it might be maintenance, it might be air traffic control. And what we do is, in theory, there are gaps in any one of these layers. But what we try to do is we try to adjust accordingly so that if something gets through a hole in the first slice of Swiss cheese, it doesn't line up with another one. It instead runs into a blank here. So it's been around for, oh my God, 30, 40, 50 years now. And it does represent the model for that. So for people with flight anxiety, like you all ostensibly, stories like this can be deeply unsettling, but it's also a testament to training, communication, and the multi-layered safety net that protected everybody on board the Southwest airplane in this case. And in closing here, this close call isn't isolated. We've had some other things like that. We will always have things like this that happen. And it reflects a systemic issue that we need to take seriously. It is a wake-up call to improve our integration of military, private, and commercial operations. And I dare say that what we'll probably see out of this is we'll probably see a tightening up of where those airplanes can fly around like that. And it isn't just a close call, it's a call to action. And so if you talk to your congressmen, keep on them, tell them to keep the funds coming and keep the system upgrading. Because in this era of increasingly congested skies, we can't rely anymore on outdated rules and assumptions. We need, whether it's a vintage warbird or a modern jet airliner, every aircraft shares the same airspace and with it the same responsibility. And it's important to close with this: the safety net held this time, but only just. And we want this to be a moment we can strengthen the fabric of aviation and oversight, coordination, and public trust. And of course, lives and confidence depend on it. So Let me undo the share here, and we'll take any questions or anything like that.
Yeah. So just to kind of say that, and I think that's what answers really that first question. When it's more politically driven, right? Rather than like in Canada, they seem to have figured out like a partnership.
Yeah.
That makes a difference too. So maybe that's part of that push as well.
At
So
my age, I clearly think that. I clearly think, and again, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, but we never used to have disagreement in areas like this. Everybody was united on making sure that the system remains safe and stuff like that. So it does, so again, press your congressman to get their stuff together and keep working. So anyway, go ahead.
So here's a question. If an engine stalls and I wonder if you can guess who asked that. If an engine stalls in mid-flight, how long can it stay in the air? It would seem that the thrust would make the plane angle since one side has no power.
Good question. Okay. And that's the first thing. And imagine this, okay? There's 3 times, or 2 times, basically, 3 times that losing the thrust on one engine would become more of a factor. Okay. So if my right engine quit producing thrust, and if I'm on takeoff, both engines are producing their maximum thrust or close to it. So both of them are pushing as hard as they can. So if one quits, because of the being outside the center of gravity, one is going to push harder. This one's going to quit. So it would, in fact, as our person that asked the question is, it would tend to want to turn the airplane in the direction of the dead engine. So when you are a pilot, the first thing you learn is when you have an engine that is losing thrust, you step on the good engine. And it keeps the nose going straight because we want symmetrical airflow over the wings. Anything asymmetric produces a little bit less lift, okay? Now, if I'm on takeoff, I'm going to notice the differential thrust more. If I'm at altitude in cruise, I'm not producing as much thrust up there as I was on takeoff because my power is back. So it's not going to be as noticeable. What's going to be more noticeable is if I'm at an altitude above the single engine ceiling, because on one engine, I can't go as high as I can with both engines. Oops, my airplane disappeared there.
Yeah, you need to hold it in front of your face.
I know, it's terrible. I got the camera right in front of me. So if I'm at cruise altitude and I lose an engine, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on getting a lower altitude because I'm going to go down. And the indirect answer to the person's question is, how long can it fly? Until they run out of gas. We never take off with more weight than we can fly on with one engine. Not only can we fly on one engine without the one engine, we can take off, climb to a safe altitude, and turn around and come back. Okay. So on takeoff, it's more critical. I spend 50% of my time training in the simulator on losing an engine on takeoff. Altitude, not near as critical. Oops. And then descending, when I'm descending and both thrust levers are in idle, now there's hardly any thrust being pushed. So sometimes you have to work. If you were to lose an engine in an idle descent, you have to pay more diligence to the instruments to see the difference between the instruments rather than the symmetrical differences in the thrust. Okay, so I won't go any deeper down the rabbit hole, but it's a great question, very perceptive, and one that we practice all the time.
Yeah, it is. It is a really cool question. So the next one, also from Steven, is the Burbank to Vegas flight was moments in. As a panicked flyer, what do you tell yourself for the rest of the flight? That is a really good question.
Yeah. It probably varies with as many people as you have on the airplane. And if I understood correctly, what does the fearful flyer say? Or what is the passenger who became upset with that? What does he tell him? You won't think of it in those circumstances probably, but the thing that I would go to, which is what I'm residing in right now, which is how we tried to leave the presentation, that is the system worked.
Mhm.
No matter what happened, the system worked. There was an incident where American had an airplane. I can't remember where they landed or turned around and came back, or they diverted in there. But just last week, and they showed big news thing, people evacuating down the slide, and the engine was still smoking, and same kind of thing. Everybody says, "Wow, woe is me," and all that. But no, the system worked. They got everybody off that airplane and landed, and nobody got hurt. So, okay.
That
That's it. That's too easy.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, we love all of you showing up here. We will be coming back every week. The system doesn't let us get bored. It'll always come with some challenges. I hope this helped some of you. If it didn't, keep asking questions. Keep sending them to me or to Dieter, or posting them in our Birds of a Feather group there, and keep coming back. So again, we want to wish you all well for the next week. We got more stuff coming for you by the end of the year. You won't believe what's in store at Fearless Flight. So keep coming back, and it does work if you work it. So take care. And Dieter, thanks again, and my best to your family. I guess they've departed, but whatever. So have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Fearless